Okay, before we start this next unit on inequalities, I just want to take a second to do a quick review of graphing inequalities. We're going to be graphing quite a few inequalities, and if you've seen this before, I'm hoping it comes back really quickly. If you need a little bit more of an explanation, you can go through this entire video, look at the examples, and make sure you do this assignment so that you can do well on this unit. So let's go through and do this. Remember, when we're graphing an inequality, we're graphing a huge range of answers. So on this one right here, you can see that this one says m is less than -3. So I've already got a number line here with a bunch of points marked on it. So it's scaled for us and everything. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to zoom in on this, and you always want to make sure that your axis is scaled, that there's some reference point. Usually 0 is a good reference point to have on there. Since this is all marked for us, we're all in good shape here. Now what I like to do is go through and figure out, okay, here's the inequality. If we read this again, m is less than -3. So the most important number on the number line here is going to be -3. So I'm going to put a big circle around that. And then the question is, do we fill that circle in or do we leave it open? Well, we're going to leave it open because this doesn't have the little equal to line like this one does here. So we're going to circle -3, and then the question is, do we shade to the left or do we shade to the right here? So m is less than -3, or a lot of times I like to substitute the word answers in for this. So instead of saying the variable, just say answers. The answers to this inequality are less than -3. Well, if the answers are less than -3, less than would be this direction right here. So we're going to go in that direction. Again, I'm going to draw two lines, put an arrow on the end. Sometimes my arrows look pretty crappy. And then I kind of just shade in like that. Just do a little bit of diagonal shading. I will see people occasionally do things like this. They'll just draw one line and then they'll put an arrow on it. That's not the end of the world, but it really would be in your best interest to do shading like this. Down the road, we're going to be shading more than one inequality at a time, and if you're shading like this, it just makes things a little bit more difficult. But again, this is kind of the way I'd like to see those. So let's take a look at number 2. On this one right here, it says, now if you haven't been told this, make sure you keep this in mind. You should always read an inequality from the variable. So we're going to start with n right here, and since this is the larger side over here, when we read it this way, we're going to read this as n is greater than, because this is the larger side. Remember, that small point points to the small number. The alligator eats the big number, all that sort of stuff that you've been taught. So this is the bigger one. So n is greater than or equal to -2. So the answers are greater than or equal to -2. If you read it the other way from the number, it's a little bit harder to understand. So this would be -2 is less than or equal to n. And again, I'm going to use the word answers here. And I'm going to read it backwards again. I'm going to read n is greater than or equal to -2, or the answers are greater than or equal to -2. So here's -2. We're going to circle that. That's the most important number on here. And then because it can actually be equal to that, we're going to go ahead and fill this in. Okay, so shade that in. And then the answers are greater than. All the answers to this inequality are greater than -2. So greater than would be this direction right here. So we're going to shade like this. Now what I'd like you to notice is, I'm going to come back here so we can see both of these. This is a less than if we just look at the inequality, and this is a less than if we look at the inequality. But you'll notice that we're shading different directions, and that's because of where the variable is, and that's why it's so important to read an inequality from the variable. So that's how to do those two. And again, I've really found that people that struggle with graphing these do much better if they say answers instead of naming the variable. So on something like this, it says write an inequality for this. So here's what I like to do. The answers are down here, so the variables that are the answers are down here. Here's -1. That's at the very top of the answers, and these answers are less than that. That's it right there. That is the answer, especially because this is an open circle, so we wouldn't include -1 as part of the answers. So you can do it like that, and then if you wanted to rewrite it and say, okay, x is less than -1, that would be fine. It's kind of just a very convenient way of going through and coming up with an inequality that would represent that. I do want to take a look at two more. These involve decimals or fractions, things like that. I think all of these happen to be decimals. So this one says graph the inequality. So I'm going to zoom in on number 11 here, and it says K, and again I'm going to read it from here. K is small point right here, so this is the small one. 5.1 is the big one. So K is less than or equal to 5.1. So I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger so we can kind of focus on what's going on here. 5.1 is the most important number. Now 5.1 would be just a little bit past here, so we're going to do this. I'm going to put a dot right here, and I'm going to label this as 5.1 so everybody's clear on what we've got there. So that's, whoops, 5.1, sorry about that, 5.1. And then the answers are less than or equal to 5.1. Now the equal to tells us that we're going to shade this in. So this is going to be a closed in, shaded in circle. We call that a closed endpoint. And the answers are less than or equal to 5.1. So less than 5.1 would be this direction right here. Again, I'm going to draw those lines, extend it to the end, and do just a little bit of shading. You don't have to get carried away. That's what the answer is to that one. So again, you can't graph this perfectly, but you do know that it's going to be a little bit further than 5. So in between 5 and 6, a little closer to 5 than it is to 6. And then if you label that, it makes it even easier. Okay, let's take a look at this one. You'll notice that on number 18, it does not have any marks on the number line, so it hasn't been scaled yet. So by far the most important number on this number line is 3.2. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a 0 on here just for reference, and then I'm going to put a circle here, and I'm going to label that as 3.2. Now what would be really cool is if you could do this, is 3, and then 4 would probably be around there or something like that. So kind of indicate that it's in between the two of those. And I guess on this particular one, maybe 4, maybe if we put it there, because this would be 2 and this would be 1, that might look pretty good. And then again, read it from the variable. I am going to leave this open because it's not an equal to. It doesn't have that bottom part of the equal sign on there, so it can't actually equal 3.2. That's just kind of the border between the numbers that work and the number that don't, or the numbers that don't. And then the answers are less than 3.2. So again, the less than direction is this way. So I'll put that on there, do a little bit of shading, and we're done. That's it. That's all there is to graphing those.